Ever since Ion was born, his life had been a quiet tragedy wrapped in luxury. His body refused to obey him, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down, while the world outside moved freely and without concern. Doctors had tried every test, every advanced treatment, every experimental therapy, but all they could offer were sympathetic smiles and empty words. His father, a billionaire whose name was known in every corner of the world, spared no expense. He called in specialists from across the globe, bought the most advanced medical equipment, and even funded private research laboratories, but nothing changed. The machines beeped in sterile silence, as if mocking the helplessness that pervaded every room of the sprawling mansion. Ion's life was confined to a wheelchair that glided silently over marble floors, surrounded by walls that gleamed with wealth but resonated with loneliness. The grandeur of his surroundings felt hollow. Expensive toys lay untouched, priceless gadgets sat in pristine boxes, and the best education could not reach the world beyond his physical limitations. The staff moved around him with quiet efficiency, attending to his needs with mechanical politeness. Their faces showed compassion, but their eyes carried the unspoken truth. They had accepted that Ion might never move, never speak freely, never truly live. Despite all the luxury, the mansion was a cage. Days blended into nights, and nights into days, with the only constant being the window in his room. Through it, Ion watched children run freely in the streets, dogs chase after balls, and the wind move the trees as if life itself were mocking him. He longed to touch the world outside, to feel it, to join it, but his body betrayed him at every attempt. The isolation was suffocating. Friends were almost non-existent. Playdates were rare, because no one knew how to interact with someone who could not join in the simplest of games. Teachers spoke to him politely but kept their distance, unsure if their words truly reached him. Ion's father, despite his immense wealth and influence, was often absent. He had built an empire but failed to build the courage to face the helplessness of his own child. Expensive gifts, advanced treatments, and even lavish trips could not replace the simple touch, the kind words, and the human connection that Ion craved. And so, he remained in silence, staring out of his window, dreaming of a life that seemed impossible, a life where he could move, speak, and be more than a paralyzed boy trapped in a mansion filled with everything except hope. One rainy afternoon, a small figure appeared at the gates of the mansion. Zara, a young girl from a poor neighborhood nearby, had been wandering the streets to escape the relentless gray drizzle. She was no stranger to hardship. Life had forced her to grow up quickly, to survive on courage and quick thinking. Her clothes were tattered, and her shoes had holes in them, but her eyes held a spark that no hardship could dim. By some twist of fate, or perhaps by destiny itself, she found herself at the mansion, curious and unafraid, slipping past the grand gates that towered like guardians over Ion's silent world. She wandered through the hallways, marveling at the opulence that surrounded her. Everything gleamed. Chandeliers, marble floors, walls adorned with priceless art, but for Zara, it wasn't the wealth that captured her attention, it was the quiet loneliness that seemed to cling to the place like a shadow. When she finally reached Ion's room, she didn't knock. She simply stepped inside, her presence breaking the long-held silence. There he was, a boy confined to a wheelchair, staring out the window as if the world beyond it held all the life he could never reach. "Why do you just sit here all day?" Zara asked bluntly, her voice breaking the monotony of the quiet room. Her words were startling, not because they were cruel, but because they carried a strange honesty, an innocence untainted by fear or pity. Ion wanted to respond, but the words stuck in his throat, trapped behind the limitations of his body. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, someone saw him, not as a helpless boy or a rich man's son, but as a person. Zara crouched beside his wheelchair, examining him with a mixture of curiosity and determination. She wasn't a doctor, and she didn't carry expensive machines, but there was something in her approach that felt different. She spoke to him as if he could hear every word, telling him stories, asking him questions, making him laugh in ways he hadn't in years. Then one day, after weeks of gentle persistence, she did something unexpected. She placed her tiny hand over his wrist, feeling for movement, for any sign that his body could respond. "What if I told you I think I can help?" she whispered, almost conspiratorially. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a conviction stronger than any doctor's prescription or billionaire's resources. Ion's heart raced. Could this poor little girl, who had nothing, really offer him the one thing that money and science could not: hope? Zara spent the following weeks by Ion's side, turning his room into a world of small victories and quiet miracles. She was relentless but patient, coaxing him to move his fingers, wiggle his toes, and shift his arms ever so slightly. She told him stories of her own life, of streets filled with laughter and sorrow, of nights spent under the stars with no roof but a blanket, and of moments when hope seemed impossible yet refused to die. Each tale was a spark, each gentle push a key unlocking a door long sealed by fear and neglect. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the windows, Zara noticed something remarkable. Ion's hand twitched slightly when she encouraged him to reach for a small wooden toy she had placed nearby. At first, it was so subtle that she almost missed it, a tiny flex of his fingers, but she saw it, and her eyes widened. "You see that?" she whispered, excitement dancing in her voice. "You can move. I knew you could." Encouraged by this small breakthrough, Zara devised a series of exercises, turning them into games. She made Ion laugh, cheered every tiny movement, and never let him feel like he was failing. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, his muscles began responding. Ion could lift a hand, then an arm, then a leg. The mansion, which had been a cage of silence and despair, now echoed with laughter, whispered triumphs, and the sound of hope returning to a life once thought lost. Then came the day that changed everything. With Zara beside him, guiding, supporting, and believing in him more than anyone ever had, Ion managed to push himself forward in his wheelchair without assistance. The motion was small, hesitant, and shaky, but it was undeniable. Tears filled his eyes, and he looked at Zara with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. "I can move," he whispered, his voice trembling. She smiled, her own eyes glistening. "You've always had it in you. You just needed to believe." News of this miraculous progress spread quickly through the mansion, reaching Ion's father, who had spent years helplessly watching from afar. He arrived, breathless, and for the first time truly saw his son, not as a patient, a project, or a symbol of his wealth, but as a person reclaiming his life. In that moment, it was clear, no amount of money could have achieved this. It was courage, compassion, and belief, embodied in a poor little girl, that had unlocked Ion's world. Together, Ion and Zara had proven that hope, when nurtured, could move mountains and defy the impossible.